Today with me is registered dietitian Derek Lipton. He is a board certified specialist in sports dietetics with experience in weight management and sports nutrition. And today we're going to be talking all about nutrition and mental health for athletes. So thanks just for coming on. I'm excited to talk more about all of that.
No, of course. Thank you for having me on. No, I'm really excited, especially when I found you on Threads and kind of just saw the stuff you're posting. I'm like, hey, it's an interesting topic and something I definitely see a lot with my clients. So I think this would be good to talk about.
Yeah, so you do have a background in sports, lots of background in nutrition. So
hmm
just give me the lowdown. What is your history in all this?
Yeah, so I grew up, like a lot of kids, just playing multiple sports, soccer, baseball, basketball. Um, and I was always that undersized kid. I was like 5'8", 115 pounds most of high school, so getting pushed around a lot. Like, it was
Dude, that's
rough.
like so underweight.
Yeah, I was very underweight, and part of it was, I had ADD, or I still have it, but I was taking Adderall. I started that right before high school. So I had finished growing by that point, but like I was always a skinny kid, but then it was hard for me to really gain weight throughout high school just because how suppressed my appetite was from medication, and I ate a good
Mm.
amount, but still got full easily from it. And I see that a lot now with clients. So it's always like interesting to talk about that. But yeah, by senior year of high school, trying to decide, what I want to do with my life. I knew I was going to college, but like what I want to do. Started getting more into like the fitness and all that, and then seeing the connection between nutrition and weightlifting and just overall athletic performance. And that's really just what sparked my interest to want to become a sports dietitian. And then grad school, internships, and it all led to me starting my own business.
Kind of always ends up that way for a lot of people with ADHD, I think.
Yeah,
I think there's like just a disproportionate amount of people who have ADHD who are also like owning their business, entrepreneurs, content creators.
yeah, it makes sense because it's like when you're working for someone, there's always a lot to do, but it's more routine and all that. Whereas, with business, I can kind of, for the most part, do what I want. Like, hey, I want to work on this today. Oh, I'm going to work on this today. I can do this. Like, I can work on 5 different projects in 1 hour if my brain wants to, which does happen. I think honestly, the hour before this call, I think I did about 3 or 4 different things.
Amazing. And then like it's amazing because like you don't have that authority you have to appeal to.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, it also means that we don't have people to tell us to finish things.
yeah. I mean, you got clients, so that kind of
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Gotta like cultivate that external motivation through other people than a
yeah,
manager.
exactly.
It,
Yeah,
it works. What was that like growing up for you? So you went on Adderall, you said, right?
yeah.
So obviously that's an appetite suppressant,
hmm
and that's really hard for a lot of people. So I never went on medication. So I don't actually have that experience yet. I'm just curious what it
Okay.
actually feels like.
It, it's it's really hard to tell, like, or it's hard to explain what it feels like because it becomes your everyday life, right? Like, some people, when they get prescribed Adderall, they're told to, take it when you need it or just take it during the week and not the weekends. But because of sports and everything like that, I was told to take it every single day because I needed the concentration every day. So it was just my new normal. Whereas someone that takes it as needed would be like, oh, I'm good. Oh, the days I take it, I can't eat at all.
Mm.
Um, what I noticed was while it was a little bit of an appetite suppressant, it wasn't as suppressing on a daily basis as it was for those who took it as needed.
Hmm.
Because I guess I got kind of used to it, and then I learned how to force myself to eat. Learned how to, I would eat breakfast before taking medication to help with that, and then eventually you just get kind of used to it. And now at a point I'm on a much lower dose than I was in high school, so it has zero impact on my appetite anymore. Just because, yeah. But it was hard to navigate, and honestly, because I didn't have like, you know, we didn't have social media. We had YouTube and Facebook, but it wasn't really the same as far as like scrolling for content like we do now. So I didn't have those resources to learn like the tricks and stuff that I know now that I then share with kids and
Mm.
share with clients to help, which I really wish I had. But yeah, it was just I ate what I could, and I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think like, hey, I should be eating more, or I need to push past this appetite suppressant. I just stopped eating when I was full, and yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's something that's so common with a lot of people with ADHD. Just like if you don't feel hungry, then you don't need to eat. Like,
yeah,
but no, that's a complete lie that our body's telling us. We have to
exactly.
eat.
Especially as an athlete, and that goes for
Yeah.
really any athlete, even those without ADD. But it's harder. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so much harder. And you typically work with athletes, obviously. Is it
Mm.
mainly high school or?
So I mean, I work with all clientele. Like I work with athletes, non-athletes. Like so, I have like my whole adult clientele as well. But when it comes to athletes, the majority of them are high school and college athletes. It started out with really just almost all high school, and between just who found me online, like through Google and through social media, because that was my marketing strategy was targeting high school athletes. Like, hey, you want to improve your nutrition to get a college scholarship, and my social media blew up in 2020 along with everyone else. So, but
Right,
at this
classic
point, I
COVID.
have a yeah, I have a lot of followers that are now in college because it's been
Mm.
for almost 5 years. So now I have a mix of clients of athletes from high school and college, and actually some middle school as well.
That's a pretty wide demographic.
Yeah,
And like every single one of them needs different things. But are
oh,
there
so
like
very different.
just like general guidelines for athletes when you think about
Yeah,
nutrition?
yeah. So I would say like kind of way to look at it, and I'm sure it's probably a better analogy, but think about like doctors, right? So every doctor goes to the same 4 years of med school. They learn all the same stuff there, and then they do their residency to fine tune for whatever they want to do. It's kind of like that. Pretty much every athlete has the same basic foundation, okay? Protein, carbs, fruits and vegetables, get your fats in, get your nutrients in, your hydration, how to fuel before a workout, after a workout. Those foundations are the same. And then you fine tune it by sport and then further fine tune it by the individual. So, a soccer player and a basketball player might eat the same way. And that just happens to work out like that. It's rare because a lot of the times a basketball player is going to be bigger than a soccer player. They're
Mm.
going to be taller and often weigh more. So they're going to need more calories. The nature of the sport, it's a little more intermittent. Like basketball's a little more intermittent because it's shorter game, quicker pace with more stopping, whereas soccer is just you keep going. So you kind of factor those things in as well. But that's just the games. Off-season training, practices, all that, they're all still very hard and burning a lot of calories. So there is a lot more overlap between like different sports than most people would think. But it's that little 10 to 20% difference that when you apply it to that individual athlete starts to make that huge difference and helps them separate from the rest of the players.
Mm. So I was like in high school, I did powerlifting.
Okay.
Um, so what would you say the difference for eating for like say powerlifting would be versus like cross country?
Yeah. So powerlifting is a unique one because, and that's actually funny that you mentioned cross country because one of the jokes with like cross country is like my sport is your sport's punishment, right? And with
It
powerlifting,
so is. I
yeah, and
hate
with
running.
powerlifting, your sport is the other sport's off-season training, right? It's just the lifting, but you have there's more to it because you have to get to a specific number of your training, but it's also a weight class sport, so you have to make sure you're not
Yeah.
gaining too much weight. So it's okay, like with other sports, you're like, hey, you want to gain weight in the off season? Okay, lift and eat this many calories, you'll gain a lot of muscle. You might gain some fat, but that's okay. You'll still perform well. In powerlifting, you really want to fine tune the nutrition to focus a lot more on protein so you can maximize muscle growth without well, while limiting fat mass as much as possible because you don't want to go into a new weight class. And since you're not running and things like that, or the running's not important, it doesn't matter. Like your carb intake isn't as important as long as you have enough energy to get through the lifting. But this is where that sport specific nutrition comes in handy. Lifting doesn't require nearly as much carbs as any other sport. And the research has shown you really don't have to have carbs before you go work out. Whereas you do need carbs before you go run or play a sport. So
Oh, that's so interesting.
yeah, because weightlifting really does not deplete glycogen that much. So as long as you have a general good carb intake, your stored up glycogen will be enough to get you through that workout. So with powerlifting, yeah, we're going to go with a higher protein diet to make sure that we maximize as much muscle growth as possible, but limit the excess calories since protein is satiating and has a high thermic effect. So you really maximize muscle growth without um, adding as much fat weight. But that seems like every athlete would think like, well, that's what I want too. I want to gain as much muscle as possible too. But the difference is if you were to eat that very, very high protein and low fat, low carb diet and go play soccer or basketball or football, you're not going to have the energy to go play. You might get big in the off season. As I always tell us athletes, like stop lifting and eating like a bodybuilder because you might get big and build a lot of muscle, but you're not going to be able to run on the field. And that's a huge difference there. And then to your point with cross country, it's different. Yeah. A lot of carbs. Get a lot of carbs. Still need a lot of protein, but it's very more carb focused.
Yeah. I mean, I just think about like I had friends in cross country and
Yeah.
like they would do like spaghetti meals like right before a race, like the night before. Does that
So
have
that's
any
funny.
like actual help, like carb loading bef like the night before?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because that's one of the biggest myths about carb loading. People are like, oh, I'm gonna have a big pasta dinner night before a race because I'm gonna carb load. That's not what carb loading is. That's just eating a high carb meal. Carb loading is actually it's a very specific science. It's you start 7 to 10 days before a race, and it's a gradual increase in the percentage of calories that come from carbs while also tapering your mileage. And it manipulates the glycogen storage capacity in your muscles so that you are literally storing up more carbs throughout the week to get into that race. Eating a big pasta meal the night before doesn't do that. It gives you more carbs, but if your glycogen stores are full, then it's not doing anything for you. The other thing too is you don't need to carb load for a 5K because your normal glycogen storage capacity and a little snack right before is more than enough. Carb loading is really only for like marathons, maybe a half marathon, depending on how you run and what energy systems you use. But really, marathons and longer are what carb loading is actually for.
Yeah, that's so
Um,
interesting. Huh.
yeah, it's one of those huge myths, and it's kind of like one of my pet peeves. I don't get like super annoyed because I know what people mean, but it's one of those little pet peeves that most sports dietitians have is when someone says, oh, "I'm going to carb load the night before the big pasta dinner." I'm like, no, that's just you're just eating a high carb dinner, and it can help. Yes, like I'm not saying don't do it. Like I did it for my half marathon. I had a big pasta dinner, but that's not carb loading.
Mm. Wow. Wow, that's amazing. I did not know that. I just kind of assumed that like, oh, that's just what runners do right before a race.
Yeah, and it works. It's not carb loading.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
that's so interesting. Sort of off topic, but I mean similar. I read a lot of research, obviously,
Yeah.
right? And as I was researching about caffeine, like caffeine on an empty stomach, because that's a pretty widely like pronounced myth out there that like if you have caffeine on an empty stomach, your cortisol elevates. And so I like trying to like look into that so I can share more about it. And I found a study that was on running and caffeine on an empty stomach. Um, it actually improves your time.
Yeah, I haven't found the research on like caffeine and cortisol. I know a lot of holistic and naturopaths will mention that. Um,
Yeah,
and
it's
based on that, I think it's just a
yeah.
misinterpretation of research. You know,
Hmm.
you're a lot, and I'm sure you probably know this more than I do. A lot of research is correlation without causation, and people that aren't educated or trained in interpreting research don't always see that. They just kind of see what's written, but don't kind of find that insight. So, for example, most people that are drinking coffee on an empty stomach, it's probably because they're too, or they're quote unquote too busy to eat breakfast.
Mm,
Why are they too busy to eat breakfast? Because they have a lot of work. They have a high stress job or have high stress school. Well, what raises cortisol? Stress. So correlation, coffee in an empty stomach is associated with people that have high stress, which is high cortisol.
yeah.
It wouldn't from a physiological standpoint, it wouldn't make sense of why putting caffeine into a stomach would increase cortisol. It just doesn't make sense. Like How is that
Yeah, and
happening?
that's like what we see in the research,
Yeah.
that immediate effects of it does not impact cortisol. It's more the fact that well, there is the sugar. So like a lot of people who have caffeine, which is
Yeah.
coffee, like coffee for breakfast, it tends to like if you're going out to Starbucks for it,
Yeah.
that's basically just high dose sugar at one time, and high dose sugar at one time actually does impact our cortisol.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so that might be also where a lot of people are getting it from. But then speaking of breakfast, like obviously coffee's not breakfast. But that is something that a lot of people do, especially like kids in high school, like adolescents. They are one of the most notorious for skipping breakfast,
Yeah.
alongside with ADHD. So ADHD is actually the only mental health condition so far that we have a correlation with skipping breakfast and the mental
Mhm.
health condition. So kids with ADHD skipping breakfast, that's a lot of people. How
Yeah.
does that really impact?
So it's obviously you got to get down to the root cause of why they're skipping breakfast. Is it, the most obvious would be the appetite issue, but you really the appetite suppressing impact of Adderall and other stimulants isn't immediate. It's usually about like an hour or so. So like you should be able to take your medicine and eat breakfast without issue. Um, but if they're waiting too long, that's possible. The other could be maybe, this is not my area of expertise, but time blindness, right? So it's just not realizing they have more time to eat breakfast because
Mm.
they think I got to get out the door, right? Like they don't realize they have 20 minutes, so you can get a whole breakfast in that time. And I struggle with time blindness too, but I think I just have things down to a science. Like I know how long breakfast is going to take me, so if I have to leave by a certain time, I wake up. But that's me. Um, my strategy for really any high school student, college student, or even working professional that just doesn't have time for breakfast or feel like they have time or doesn't have much of an appetite is protein smoothies. It
Mm.
is so simple. You can take a few minutes to make in the morning, or you can even make it the night before, sit in the fridge, right? Take some milk, some protein powder. You throw some fruit in there, some nuts, or sorry, like seeds or peanut butter, a little bit of honey and oats for the carbs, and you're good to go. Um, if you really need your coffee in the morning, you can also literally just pour a cup of coffee into that, or it'll actually be really good. Um,
Yeah,
my
coffee chocolate protein shake. That sounds
yeah,
really
I do.
good.
Yeah, I do protein coffee a lot, more so in the afternoon. My wife's the one that got me onto it because she used to do it before work because I was so on her about protein because she was the person that would just like not have breakfast or just cereal, something not a lot of protein. And
Yeah.
I'm like, why don't you get start with more protein early in the day? And then so I'm sponsored by a supplement company, I get free protein powder. So we had all these fun flavors. She's like, okay, I'll try this in my coffee, and she loved it, and that helps her get more protein intake in. Yeah, so that's something anyone can do too. You get like a mocha flavored protein powder, mocha milk, banana, peanut butter, and coffee. It's going to be a great combo.
Mm,
And then if you just throw a little honey in there for your carbs, and then you're good.
yeah.
And now
I've
you have a
also
high
seen,
protein, high caffeine breakfast.
yeah, I've also seen people just like dump protein powder in their like hot coffee.
Yeah, so that's what I was talking about originally. Like that's what
Oh,
my wife
yeah.
does, and then that's what I started doing too. But this is another option
Yeah. The
for full
smoothie
breakfast
part.
because she
Yeah.
would do that like in addition to like she would have like her toast or cereal, and then this would just be to add more protein. But if the smoothie is your whole breakfast, that's what I recommend doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the protein coffee is not a
It's
complete
good for a
breakfast,
snack,
ideally.
maybe. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, there's other options too. You can do like Kodiak waffles and add some like nut butter to it and
Mm,
have some fruit. There's high protein cereals, and you pair that with milk and like some berries. Like there's a lot of ways. And I think one issue is people get hung up on like hearing, well, that's not breakfast, that's not breakfast. Like, so they think, well, if that's not a full breakfast, I might just well not do it. But
mm,
if your options are half a bagel with cream cheese or nothing, that half bagel with cream cheese is going to be your better option for the most part. If you're not as active and you're looking to lose weight, maybe not. And that's a lot more nuanced, which is kind of a lot to get
hmm.
into. But if you need
Yeah.
to gain weight or maintain weight, yes. If you are trying
Yeah.
to lose weight, having that high carb breakfast might not be as beneficial because you're going to get hungry again shortly after anyway. So now you're just adding more calories in.
Mhm.
That's a
But
whole
it's
other
also
story.
important to like recognize for yourself, like if you are on a weight loss journey, breakfast is actually one of the biggest indicators of if you're going to lose weight or not.
Yeah.
And like that is also something that I think a lot of people get wrong because they think like the less you eat, the more you're going to lose weight. But that's not true because, well, obviously it is true, but like
Yeah.
it's not true in the fact of if you eat breakfast, it's actually going to make you more satiated throughout the day, so you're less likely to binge eat at night.
Yeah.
And that's like where all your extra calories typically come from when you have a hard time losing weight, if you're on a restrictive type of pattern eating. Like if you're not
Exactly.
eating
Yeah, you're
breakfast, like
right.
yeah.
It depends, right? Some people, will do intermittent fasting, they skip breakfast, but they eat high protein and structure throughout the day, and it works. People that a lot of times I'll see people, this is a lot more with adults. They'll skip breakfast, have a small lunch, no snacks during the day. So you think, well, I really don't eat during the day. Why am I not losing weight? Two things. One, you're not getting enough energy, so now you're not working out. Or if you are working
Mm,
out, it's really low quality, so you're not burning as many calories. Now you come home, you have two portions at dinner and all this junk food after dinner because you're so hungry.
yeah.
One of the biggest things with my adult clients that has been so beneficial is literally adding a protein shake around like 3 o'clock.
Mm,
And because all these clients be like, I'm so hungry at night and I binge on these foods and like I get chocolate cravings at night and I get and like that's why they can't lose weight. Okay, 3 o'clock, add some milk with like 1 and 1/2 scoops of a chocolate flavored protein powder since you have chocolate cravings. They do that. And some of the other changes we talk about too, but that one's the big one. We follow up 3 weeks. So how are your cravings? No cravings at night because the satiating aspect of the protein, right? We associate cravings with stress or desire, but a lot of times it's hunger because
mm,
when you're hungry and you're weak, your body obviously wants that energy, wants carbs. But when you're really hungry or really low on energy, the body knows it wants that energy quickly. So you're not going to crave a potato, right? You're going to crave sugar, which is the junk food, because your body knows that's going to hit the system more quickly and give you that energy. Um, and that's why getting more early in the day can help limit that junk food eating later in the day.
yeah, exactly why. Well, I don't know if it's exactly why, but like that's probably a big reason why we also see research indicating that people who eat breakfast are also at a much significant lower risk for diabetes too.
Okay.
Like, makes sense,
Yeah, no, it
right?
does. Yeah,
It's just, yeah, breakfast I am a huge, huge proponent of.
me too. I love breakfast.
Uh, but it's hard if you have mental health because, like, I mean, going back to ADHD, when you, I mean, obviously, like, there's that stimulant suppressant for your appetite if you are on stimulants. But then there's also that black and white thinking that comes with ADHD that a lot of people tend to have, where exactly what you talked about, if it's not the perfect breakfast, then I might as well not eat it.
Yeah, and that's again what social media has kind of pushed on us, which is like kind of the issue. Um, and the I mean, there is an extent like sometimes eating something might be worse than nothing, but again, that's really for those trying to lose weight and what you're eating. But as an athlete, as a student that's about to go sit in school, eating a slice of toast or eating half a bagel, it's not a great breakfast on its own, but it is better than literally just doing nothing and waiting until lunch.
Yeah.
Everything you do in those first few classes before lunch, your brain's just not doesn't have the energy.
Yeah.
Um, and there's so many things you can do. You can do toast on the way out. You can do the smoothie. Like, there's a lot of good options to get the energy in that you need. And like I said,
Mhm.
if you wake up and you take your medicine and you get that breakfast within a half hour, 45 minutes, the appetite suppressant impact should not hit you yet. I mean, everyone's a little bit different. Sometimes it does go quicker, but it shouldn't be that impactful yet. And if it is, what a lot of my clients will do is, yeah, they'll eat breakfast and then take the medicine after. So it really, in those cases, their days are very bookended. So they have a big breakfast and a big dinner because by the
Mhm.
time dinner rolls around, the medicine is worn off because it's usually about like a 12-ish hour impact as far as like the main
Yeah.
impact. So you have that, and then yeah, like they might not eat as much for lunch or snacks during the day, which is when that's where we really manipulate what they're eating so we can get calories in, but get the bulk of their like fiber and protein at the bookends, like the lunch and, or sorry, the breakfast and the dinner, because that's when the appetite is there. And then even a big snack at night, kind of take advantage of that. Because the other thing I do notice with these kids, yeah, they're very active, but they're not eating a lot. They'll eat dinner at like 6 o'clock, and they're starving again at 8 o'clock, and again at like 9:30,
Mm.
because the way an appetite suppressant doesn't get rid of hunger, it just blocks it, right? It suppresses
Yeah.
it. So it's the energy needs are still there. So now it's finally catching up to you,
Mm.
because the brain
So
is
it's a lot of,
allowing you to feel
yeah,
it. But yeah,
a lot of trying to make sure that we're getting ahead of it and ignoring that and actually eating for our energy needs versus just going off of what we feel like our body wants,
yeah,
which is hard. And like add on to that interoception issues with ADHD, like it's just a recipe for
yeah.
difficulty. So you mentioned a little bit about like social media and how there is like that messaging out there on like breakfast, like you have to have this perfect breakfast, otherwise like it doesn't count, like cereal is bad for you, stuff like that. Are there other like social media messagings or like fears that you see a lot of these athletes just like get online?
Oh, so many, but I don't think we have enough time to go through all. Uh, it's rough, and it's like I go so back and forth on like social media. I'm like, if like obviously if TikTok should be banned or not, because I mean my business grew because of TikTok, so like I'm grateful for that. But it's gotten so much worse.
Mm.
And while there's a lot of good out there, there's a lot of bad out there, and it seems like the bad information is getting pushed more. I don't know why.
Probably
And
because it's more fun to see. Like
yeah,
it's
and it gets more
fear
engagement.
feeds.
And the thing is, like, as an adult, it's a little easier to kind of think more critically as far as like, maybe that's not true. Maybe I should consider this further. Kids, they don't know. Like
Mm.
you don't know that there's good and bad out there. I mean, there's good and bad out there, but like how to differentiate it and stuff like that, and they're more susceptible to it. Um, and it's what's interesting is like a lot of things that get pushed on social media are like general general nutrition. So I always say to my because most of my followers are athletes, I'll be like, well, this doesn't really apply to you anyway, or like, I'm not gonna get bothered with this because it's not gonna apply to my audience. Um, and the biggest thing recently is the whole carnivore and animal-based trend, because I'm like, all right, well,
Yeah.
athletes don't need carbs, they're not gonna fall for this, like, and it crossed over eventually. Like it's just so impactful on social media that it's crossed over, and now I'm dealing with it and correcting it. I'll have athletes that, you know, follow the animal-based diet coming to me, or like at least practices of it. So they avoid all seed oils. They, only eat sourdough bread and meat and cheese, and they really don't have a lot of carbs in their diet because they won't eat processed, they won't eat this, they won't eat that. And it's me correcting like one, the whole thing about seed oils is completely false. There's tons of research on humans to show that it's false. If you're a rat, different story, but you're not. And it's not, and it's actually beneficial for you, as long as it's calorie for calorie, right? And then going into
Mm.
the fact that seed oils are cheaper, so it's they're consumed in higher quantities, and that's why we've seen the health impacts. uh and the fact that, like, no, you don't need to eat just steak and eggs all the time. Like, you need a lot of carbs, you need a lot of bread and a lot of rice and pasta and potatoes and all that. um so that's one of the biggest ones there. um as far as nutrition. And then, because since I'm also a strength coach, I'm dealing with that aspect as well. One of the bigger ones, and this is more understandable that kids have kind of fallen for it, is how to work out, like how to lift. And I kind of alluded to this earlier. I'll meet with clients or I'll come across kids and they're like, well, I'm trying to build muscle in the off season, so I'm lifting 5, 6 days a week and I'm doing a PPL split, or they're spending all this time doing bicep curls, triceps extensions. And to their point, it's not that there's bad information out there with that regard. It's just that the information they find isn't applicable to athletes. And that's where it gets
Mm.
complicated, because in my line of work, I'm sorting through the misinformation and the factual information. then taking that factual information and further splitting it between applicable and not applicable. If you're just looking to, get big, look good, all that, and you lift 5 days a week with PPL split, that's great. But as an athlete, that's too much. It's unnecessary, and then it takes away from other training. So they'll lift 5 days a week for 2 hours each, and then not do their running or their skill work or whatever it is. Uh, and again, to that point, the information they're following isn't wrong, and there's really not a lot of strength coaches on social media talking about how an athlete should lift or what their program should look
Mm.
like. There's a lot of strength coaches out there, but they're not really talking about that. So that I don't really blame people for following and doing, because there's nothing else for them. The nutrition stuff is more frustrating because tons of misinformation out there. Um, I haven't yet come across any clients that are drinking raw milk, but I'm
That's
sure that
good.
will eventually happen, and that'll be that'll be an interesting one. But it's scary because these it's a certain group of people. It's a lot. I do notice a strong correlation, like in the bios, people either be holistic, naturopath, functional medicine, like all that group of stuff. Seems to be a strong correlation between those individuals and the ones that are promoting the anti-seed oils, doing raw milk, that kind of stuff. And it's just these people are very good content creators, and credit to them. They make great videos. They're entertaining, they're engaging, and because of that, they have a lot of followers. They get a lot of views, and that's the terrifying part. Because while social media is a great resource, the algorithm, for the most part, is not geared towards, oh, this is the most factual information or this is the best information for you. It's what's the most entertaining, because it's an entertainment platform. And to that point, the people at Meta and at TikTok, they're not trained to say, well, this is right and this is wrong, because they're not in the medical community. So they don't know for sure. So they can't say, nope, this video doesn't go up because it's wrong. Like, there are cases of that, but it has to be really, really severe. And when it comes to things like raw milk, anti-seed oil, saturated fats, statins, there's not enough that they can do to take that off. And that's not their own fault. It's just where we're at as far as freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff. But that's, again, the issue is because these people are such great content creators, they're getting the views, they're getting the followers, and then you have people that just don't know any better, and that's not their own fault. It's they just never received that education because they learned other things. They either are still in high school, or they learned business, or they learned engineering, or whatever it is. They don't know how to sort the right from the wrong there, other than the battles that we have of, well, no, that's wrong, this is right, here's the research. But if I can make these rebuttal videos and I get 2,000 views, but the one saying avoid seed oils, drink raw milk got 500,000 views, there's only so much I can do. And that's the
Yeah,
frustrating part.
that is like the unfortunate aspect of science communication.
Yeah.
It's not as like jazzy as like avoid this one food for the rest of your life and you're going to be amazing. Like,
Yeah. And
unfortunately, like science communication is a lot different because we have to account for nuance and we have to account for like individual differences.
yeah. And then the one thing that's frustrating too is that community is like, because we'll fight back and be like, well, here's the research showing this, this, and this. And that community, they'll just fight back and say, well, no, research is flawed. It's funded by big pharma, big
Mm,
food, whatever. Even though like the studies that will show, it'll show the conflicts of interest in the funding, and none of what they said is true.
yeah.
But like, how do you fight back against that? Because all they say, anytime you say a study, there's like, no, that's funded by big pharma. That's that's not reliable. And like, you're not going to convince them otherwise. And then they're gonna keep spewing their stuff that has no research behind it. So that's what's frustrating, because you can't even use science to refute the claims because they just say the science is biased. And I'm like, there are studies, yes, that are biasly funded, and you can easily find that in the studies and know not to use those. But the majority of research out there is not biasly funded.
Right. Like a lot of the research is just people who are curious,
Yeah.
who want to learn more, and then they study it.
Yeah.
Like obviously they have to get funding, but usually that's through Well, I mean, I guess it depends on like where you're getting it from.
Yeah,
A lot of it is through like governmental funding
yeah,
because like that's how we actually learn because we get money to
yeah,
do it. But
exactly.
I guess if you don't trust the government, that makes it harder.
They're just,
So,
yeah, it's a lot of spreading distrust in the standard practices and standard research and all that, so that you feel like, well, I can't trust what I've been told. Let me try whatever's new. And that's part of why these
mhm.
holistic practices have become so popular, is because it's just new. People are fed up with how
Yeah.
things are, and they hear something different. It sounds cool. It,
And like that's a valid feeling.
yeah,
It's so valid because a lot of people have felt like they are just being pushed away by the wayside or
yeah,
they've been lied to for their entire lives. And like it's a normal response to go that route. Um, but that's, I think, why we need to teach a lot more critical thinking,
hmm,
especially in high school, like when we are developing a lot more of our
yeah,
prefrontal cortex, because like that's where it's really important to learn how to dissect information and understand the source, understand are they trying to sell me something? Like where is this information coming from? And then also along that same line, with adolescents, especially, they are a lot more susceptible to orthorexic behavior
yeah.
through online messaging.
Oh my God. Yeah. Seen, unfortunately, a lot of that. It's tapered off a little bit, but I would say 2 to 3 years ago was like the peak of my new clientele was orthorexia, um, triggered mostly by social media. And reason for that is because obviously 2020 with COVID is when social media blew up a lot more. People were home watching this stuff. And then obviously throughout that year, people more and more found videos, stuff like that, develop these behaviors. And obviously, people want parents want to sign their kids up right when the behaviors start. It's, oh well, they started restricting a year ago and they lost their period. So yeah.
Mm.
And but no, COVID and the rise of social media saw a huge spike in orthorexia and amenorrhea among the female athletes, because again, these kids, like I said, like they're not fully developed neurologically, so they don't really know how to decipher between the good and the bad. Plus, obviously, all the issues concerning the body image. So you see this influencer, who looks great. So if you're a girl and you see this, really skinny, fit girl saying, I only eat whole foods and avoid all sugar, or you're a guy that sees a jack dude saying, avoid seed oils and only eat high protein, you're going to do that because you want to look like that and you don't know any better. Um, and then it's, especially in the athlete population, all that restriction has led to impacts in performance. And then again, the amenorrhea and the females. And it's just, you know, there's so much on it. And like I said, I found a couple studies. I have to kind of read the abstracts, but I'm going to read through them more. Just talking about the impact that social media has had on eating disorders among teens, and it's significantly increased the number just because of the
Mm.
content that's out there. And some of it is, very obvious that, hey, this is disordered eating, you shouldn't be doing that. And some of it is just, someone is really fit, all they do is lift, they don't do cardio or sports, so they can eat a certain way and they'll function fine. But you're a 16-year-old soccer player and you try to do that, it's not enough. But you don't know that you're supposed to adjust the calories accordingly. You're just thinking, well, if I want to look good and feel good, I have to cut out all things with sugar and all processed foods. And well, I can't eat that. That has oil in it. That's bad for me. And there's different levels of severity to it. I've had clients where it's really bad and they won't go to restaurants. They won't eat. They will only eat the same exact foods every single day because they're afraid to try anything different. Then there's others that were like, well, I'm kind of worried to have something too much sugar. Um, or I'm afraid to have ice cream, or I'm afraid to go out to eat, but like they'll still eat a variety of foods at home. And again, that's where the individualization comes in, as far as, okay, well, you know, let's, you like to do this, maybe let's try this because it's a little different. Or, why are you afraid of this? Let's try to hone in on that. A lot of the times they don't realize that it was social media that caused these behaviors, which is really interesting. Um, but when they talk or when they write on the form, I know where they got it from. Like I know why they're doing this, and because I've seen the videos, and I focus on that first and be like, okay, well, where's this coming from? Oh, you saw social media. Before I even say, hey, don't do that or try this food, try this food, I get down to the why of it because you can't just
Mm.
tell a kid to eat something, they're not going to do it. They need to understand why they're not doing it and why they should be doing it, or why it's irrational that they're avoiding it. And then it makes it a lot easier.
And I love that because like that's literally exactly the approach for ADHD as well.
Yeah.
Like for the majority of people who have ADHD slash also adolescents, they need to satisfy that why aspect of their brain. And like once you satisfy that why, it's a lot more easier to do that do.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, going back to breakfast, right? Like we have studies showing that when you eat breakfast, it improves your working memory. So you're better at memory recall. So, oh, you're going to be better at taking your tests.
Hmm.
So once you have that why of why to eat breakfast, it's easier to do that do.
Yeah.
So, what are some other ways that you like help people understand like their habits and their behaviors and how that actually might be detrimental to them? And then on the other
Yeah.
hand, after that, like developing the better habits.
That's one of the more individualized like approaches with these clients. So it's hard to answer it in full because obviously it depends. But the biggest thing I do really is motivation, because I know to me motivation is a big driving factor. So like, what do I want to accomplish? Why do I want to accomplish this? And that's one of the reasons I love working with high school athletes so much, is because almost all of them that come to me, their goal is to play that sport in college, whether it's D1 level or D2 or D3. So that's their goal, and it's a very hard goal. Right, only 7% go on to play in college. Only 1 to 2% play D1. Very tough goal with a very short time frame, because let's say you're a sophomore, you only have really 2 years to get recruited, and so there's a time crunch, there's that urgency, which helps. So I use that to my advantage as far as, okay, you know, this is what you need to do to become a better athlete, to get in front of those coaches, get them to notice you, and you got to do it soon. But like I said, a lot of it is um the first thing is correcting the bad behaviors, bad thoughts. So not just using motivation, but really getting to understand why. Is that like, why are they doing this? Why do they feel like this? Get them to just answer the questions, because the more and more they talk about it, or you get them to talk about it and try to answer those questions, the more they realize that they don't know why.
Mm.
All it is, they saw something on the internet and that was it. But they don't know the science behind it. They don't know what needs to be done, or like why they think this, or if it's even true or not. And it gets them to more and more realize like, maybe that's actually not the truth and I need to do something different. Um Sometimes there's an appeal to authority too, and this one gets really tricky. And this really depends on who signed up. So sometimes it's the kid will find me, like the athlete will find me and sign up, or have to talk to their parents to get me to sign up, to get to sign up with me and all that. Other times it's the parent is concerned and they're like, hey, I want to get my kid on this plan. Um, and maybe they didn't talk to the kid first about it, or they're like, I'll get him to go and all that. And sometimes it's mutual. The kid will be like, hey, I think I want to work with a dietitian, and then the parent will find me. But if the kid is the one that found me and they want to work with me from the get-go, it's a lot easier because it's already there. They already know it's a cognitive dissonance. They want to make the change already because they are the ones that sought me out. If the parents, if it's a parent that's concerned about their kid and they sign up and they hadn't really talked to the kid about it yet, sometimes there's more resistance. Not always, but sometimes there's more resistance because they think, well, why am I doing this? I don't need to change. And that alters the approach as well, because obviously that one's harder and I need to take another step back to really get them to understand the why. Whereas the ones that find me, they already know they need to do it. They know the why. So we can kind of jump right in. So it makes it fun because it makes every session different and every client different. And if every client was the same and I used the same approach, everyone, I'd get really bored.
Oh yeah.
So it makes it fun, but yeah, it's just really interesting, and that's why it's hard to answer right now, because it's just a completely different approach to every single athlete.
Mm. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean,
And
behavioral change is just very
oh
complex.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, and then I also was wondering about, so obviously there's also lots of talk on social media about protein. I mean, we talk a little bit about that with breakfast. Um, but how does that play into athleticism? When is too much? Is there too much? When is too little? Stuff like that.
So it's very rare that an athlete will come to me eating the right amount of protein. You're either eating way too much or not enough, and that's because again, protein is obviously very filling, but it's very well known that you need protein for muscle growth.
Mhm.
So a lot of kids will think like, oh, the more protein I eat, the better. So they're drinking like 50-gram protein shakes at like they weigh 140 pounds, right? And they're drinking 50-gram protein shakes, or they're eating like 3 chicken breasts at a meal, so they're having like 80 to 100 grams of protein with dinner. But then and they have a little breakfast and a little lunch, but then nothing with their snacks. So it's they're not distributing it properly. Or you get ones that really just only eat at the meals and nothing else, so they're not getting enough. But then you see, okay, well, I just need more protein. Oh, high protein this, high protein that. You have a 150-pound athlete now eating 200 grams of protein a day, which is way more
Mhm.
than they need. And what's happening is it's because protein is so filling, they're eating fewer calories. So even though they're eating all this protein to gain weight, they're actually not gaining weight because they're suppressing their appetite, even without Adderall or anything. So that's the issue. Protein really should be distributed. So 4 or 5 times a day of eating protein. Um, So if you weigh 160 pounds, you might need 150 grams a day. You can do 3 meals with, um, you know, 35 to 40 grams, and then the 2 snacks anywhere from like 15 to 20, right? Depending how you want to split it up. But if you eat protein 50 grams at 3 meals and that's it, it's not as beneficial. Plus, you're gonna be too full to eat enough later, or even with that meal. Um, but it's fascinating because of how impactful protein is that it's either not getting nearly enough or you're doing way too much. And it's very rare that I see in the middle ground, at least at first.
Yeah. What would you say like an ideal middle ground would be beyond like the like distributing?
Yeah, it's that's really what it is. It's distributing. So it it's are you getting an appropriate amount of snacks or at meals and also having it at snacks? Um, what I'll find a lot is if someone that's not eating enough protein, it's a combo, right? They're maybe not getting really enough at breakfast, or they're getting like a small amount at their meals. It's very rare that lunch and dinner don't have enough protein from what I've seen, and then breakfast is hit or miss. But what it really comes down to is the snacks, and
Mm.
they'll eat the protein at meals, but then they don't have any snacks during the day, or if they snack, it's just a granola bar, banana, or a PB&J or something like that. Nothing high protein. So they think, well, I'm getting a lot of protein. I eat it all 3 meals. That's not enough. Um, and then you get, yeah, again, the other ones where it's, you know, I eat, 16 ounces of chicken with my dinner, and I drink a glass of milk with that. Or, I finish my workout, I have my whey protein shake with 40 grams of protein, and then I eat dinner an hour later. Like, that's not necessary. So it's a lot of it's correcting that. So whether it's adjusting the portion sizes, adding into snacks, in most cases, I'm almost always adding at least 1 to 2 protein snacks, regardless of how much they're doing at the meals. That's really what it comes down to. But a lot of it is correcting that when. So like, yeah, you don't want that protein shake if you're eating dinner in an hour. Um, and I'll have smaller clients that will do the 2 scoops protein. They're 130, 40 pounds, and they're eating 50 grams, drinking 50 grams of protein in a shake, and it's not necessary. I'd rather you do 1 scoop with some milk to get like 30 grams, but then pair that with like granola bars or PB&J to get other calories in.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's another one of those things that's very individualized because protein is very individualized based on your weight. And I think it's really the only macro that doesn't vary based on activity level for the most part.
Mm.
What activity you're doing, yes, but like if you're 150 pounds and you work out twice a day, 6 days a week, or 3 days a week, once a day, your protein needs are going to be about the same, but carbs and fats will change. So that's always what's interesting.
That is really interesting. I mean, I know like from the literature that about 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram is pretty ideal for like optimal functioning for the majority of people.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what the
do
literature
you,
says.
yeah.
It's honestly on the it's a little bit on the lower end of what I like to see, just to be safe. And with athletes, you have more leeway because the calorie needs are so high that if you go to 2 grams per kilogram for protein, which uses up more calories, you still have enough room to fit in all the carbs and the fats.
Mm,
Weight loss is where it gets trickier because actually your protein needs get higher, but calories gets lower, so it's more complicated. Most athletes, I like to go around that 2 grams per kilogram just to be safe because I find that that's not high enough to cause any issues with satiety. Whereas if you go to like over a gram per pound or even like 2.5 grams per kilogram, right, that that starts to impact satiety a little bit. But yeah, the two is pretty is a pretty good spot, and then anywhere from that 1.8 to 2. And then if there are appetite issues, then we adjust it from there. But if you're distributing 2 grams per kilogram of protein across 3 meals and 2 snacks, it's really not a lot of protein at one time, right? Like, and I gave the example before 35, let's say 35 grams of protein in a meal. If you're an athlete that's working out a lot, you should have a good appetite. 35 grams of protein is really not a lot. That's, 5 to 6 ounces of meat. And then if you have rice or pasta, that contributes a little bit as well. Or if you add a little bit of cheese to it. And that's the other thing too. When people are thinking about their protein at their meals, they're really only looking at the meat. And if you
mm,
do a grain like pasta or quinoa, or something like that, there's a decent amount of protein, especially if you have a lot of carbs. You might get another 6 to 8 grams. Rice, you're only gonna get a few grams, but yeah, if you have 4 ounces of pasta, you're at like 8 grams of protein right there, if not more, depending on the type of protein pasta that you use. Um, and then actually it might be more than that actually, but yeah, and then that's on top of the meat you're doing. So that's what I mean by a lot of times athletes they'll eat more protein than they think they're doing, which is another
mm.
issue. Um, but yeah, it's just one of those things that when I see with clients, and I see this a lot more with boys, which just it makes sense, but especially baseball and football, just overdoing the protein. And then one of the first things we switch is we're going to decrease that protein intake to get more carbs and fats. And what they notice when we do that 3 week follow up is their weight went up, they gained muscle, but their strength went up, their energy, their performance, it all went up,
Mm,
even with less protein because they're eating more calories now, and they're still hitting their protein needs.
yeah.
So it's always fun to kind of apply that science and then see how it works in real life. It's always cool.
No, that is awesome. I mean, I just think back to like my lifting days because I was mainly just eating protein. I should have been eating more, right? Like,
Well, like I said, with powerlifting, it's a
ideally,
little bit different. It was a little different with
right,
powerlifting because you don't have to worry about the cardio, the running, the glycogen, all that kind of stuff. So
right. But
you
you
were
still
able
have to
to get
worry
a
about the energy aspect.
right,
And
which
that's
as long as you
where
had a
I was
yeah,
off.
yeah, as long as you didn't total like you might have been a little bit low in fats and carbs, then yes, but there was a lot more room for error, I would
Mm,
say, in powerlifting than it is in any sport that requires cardio.
that's valid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just mentioning that because just the fact that like if you don't eat enough calories, like calories is just energy at its core.
Yeah.
Like if we're not eating enough, then we're not getting enough energy to do the sport that we want to do at like the
Yes.
level that we
So
want to be at.
yeah, well, that's where the science, if you look at the science a little more closely, yes, the calories are the energy, but calories are just a general term. And what happens is it's when the bonds are broken and release energy, and those are calories. So
Mm,
that's just how we equate it. But it's not calories giving you energy. It's where the calories come from. So the carbs and the
mhm,
fats, and then if necessary, protein. Protein is a terrible source of energy. It is a last resort. It's very metabolically expensive to break apart amino acid bonds.
mm.
So if the only time protein is used for energy is if carbs and fats are insufficient. And that's why, yeah, it's just not good because it's an inefficient source. But get back to my point. we say calories because it's just easier, but it's really at high intensities, carbs are being used for energy. So the glucose is
Mhm.
being broken down, pyruvate, and so on. And as those bonds break, ATP is released. That's your energy. It requires caloric energy to break those bonds apart, and that's why we say calories. Um, but at high energy, it's more carbs. At lower energy, it's more fats. So that's where that comes in. Then obviously some, carbs can be converted into fats, some carbs can be converted into amino acids and vice versa. So it gets more nuance. But to back to the point, it's yes, calories are your energy, and if you're a little low in carbs or higher in fat, body can manipulate it, but it's less efficient. In general day-to-day life, it doesn't really matter if more of those calories come from carbs or fat, as long as the total calories are equated for, because for the most part, we're burning fats. And then our brains use glucose, and then if we have more carbs and fats, then we can, convert the carbs into fats. As a high level athlete with all the high intensity, you can't just go high fat with low carbs because converting fats to carbs really it's not as efficient because you need the oxygen and all that to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's all different. That's why it's more specific as far as it's not just calories, but you need this amount of carbs because
Mm.
that's your energy source when you run. Otherwise, you're not going to run as fast. You're not going to be able to run as hard because you're not going to get to a higher VO2. Um, but that's why it. What I always say about science is like science, especially throughout the internet and all that, has been very simplified for the average person to understand, which is great because what I just explained is going to confuse almost anyone that hasn't taken biology, which is obviously fine. Um, so we just say calories are energy, but really the technical way to look at it is calories are associated with energy
Mm.
because, like I said, it's the carbs, the bonds that hold all the atoms together contain energy or contain ATP, or when they break apart, they release ATP and they contain the energy. That's how we calculate calories and carbs is based on that. And it takes that caloric energy to break those bonds apart to give us the energy. So that's why we say X amount of calories. It's a very complicated way to look at it. In the end, if you get your calories, yeah, that's associated with energy. But yeah, just a fun little fact.
Well, it is fun. I always love
To
talking
us, at
about
least.
just like the actual like deeper science aspect because
Yeah.
like I mean obviously I communicate science online and I do have to dumb it down a lot to
Yeah.
try to fit it all into like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Um, but no, that's also why I just like love long form because then we get to talk about more of like the
Yeah.
deeper aspect of it. And it does help give us that understanding of it's complicated, but it's also not complicated at the same time because at the end of the day, most of the guidelines just indicate make sure you're eating enough, make sure you're eating enough protein, carbs, fat, variety of your diet. It's really important. And for the majority of people, that's what's going to help.
Yeah. And that's not like in the end, like yeah, if you're if you're struggling from a lot of health problems or if you're struggling a lot from performance, like you don't need to know the nitty-gritty science of like what we just said. You just need to know that, okay, like eat more nutrients, eat fewer calories or more calories, depending which the goal is. Like that's all you need to know. You don't need to know the little bits that I just said. Um, but
But it's so
that's the beauty
fun.
of science. Yeah, it helps. It helps for me to know it. So I when
Oh,
I'm
same.
working with
Yeah.
clients, yeah, it helps to like understand like, okay, like this is why it's happening. Like I know what to say. Like I know that, yeah, you need the carbs, not just the fats or whatever it is. Um, so it helps for our understanding, which is that's the point of any profession. You learn a lot more specifics in your field than the average person does, like that's on in that field, because that, if they need that specific help, that's where you come from. Like I think because my dad's a CPA, right? And I know I have to do taxes, or like I know I pay whatever tax for this and that, and to report it and whatnot. That's the general knowledge that everyone knows. But then when he does my tax return, there's all these little things, and he goes, "Oh, you could do this." I'm like, "That's why you got
Mhm.
that education. You learn all the little things there that make it even better that the average person is not going to know to do." And that's just the one example that came to mind, but that's going to be really any field is going to be like that.
And that's exactly why you want to work with somebody who has all that education and all that background knowledge, because
Yeah,
they're going to be able to give you like the exact
exactly.
science for like what's actually going to help you.
Yep.
So, oh, and then before we finish, I know that like creatine's another big thing that a lot of athletes
Oh,
talk about. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts on it.
yeah. So that's another big topic because I've done a lot of research on that because there's just so much out there. Um, simplest simplest summary: creatine, the most researched supplement out there, safest, most effective, lowest cost. Like, there's so many good things about it.
Oh
A
yeah,
lot of
there's so much.
a lot of bad like myths out there, and when you dig deeper into the research, you find out why these myths exist. Like, what people think, oh, it's bad for your kidneys. There was one case study where the authors ignored all the confounding variables, and that's to the point of biased studies, people wanting to push a certain agenda. That's an example of it, and it's unfortunate that stuff does happen. But again, that was also just a case study; it wasn't even a large scale study. It's yeah, it's great. Everyone thinks, oh, creatine just builds big muscles and that's all. That's actually not its main purpose. Its main purpose is to increase strength and power output for explosiveness. So the first 1 to 6 seconds of any action. So heavy lifting, sprinting, jumping, hitting, anything like that. Um, so that's why pretty much anyone should take it. You don't have to take it. It's not hurting yourself if you don't, but it's beneficial for anyone. If you want to get bigger, yes, obviously. Even if you want to lose weight, strongly recommend creatine because to lose weight, you got to be in calorie deficit. And calorie deficit, one of the side effects is a little bit lower energy, feeling weaker. If you take creatine, it'll help you to lift heavier in the weight room so you can maintain more muscle mass and burn more calories to help you lose weight without losing muscle mass. Phenomenal. Running, whether you're distance or short or sprints, right? Helps with that power, helps with endurance, helps with recovery. Baseball, football, soccer helps with hit power, speed, it's so many benefits to it. The one unique thing too is because again, since I work with a lot of high schoolers and parents will ask, is it okay for them to take the creatine? As you know, a lot of studies, especially randomized control trials, are not done in kids. The IRB just obviously is not going to allow that risk. Creatine is like one of the I was surprised to find this. There was like good number of studies done on adolescents. Um, because I guess they just found that it was so safe among adults that
Mhm.
we can test this out on kids. And they found all the same benefits with the strength, power, all that same stuff. They also found some additional benefits too, as far as like mental health. So like just like overall cognition, focus, school academic performance, even like I think there might have been a little bit with anxiety and stuff like that too. Um, and then with that said, like I said, it helps with cognition, so great for student athletes in school and even like remembering like playbooks and stuff like that. And it also helps with reducing concussion risk and the severity of concussions. So that like get pretty much any athlete I have in a contact sport, I recommend fish oil and creatine. If you take a hard hit to the head, nothing's going to prevent that concussion, but it could still help reduce the severity of it and reduce the recovery
Mhm.
period so you can come back sooner.
And
And
it's also where
what
choline is super important too, because
choline?
choline,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
like
So
that's,
egg yolks,
yeah,
great.
oh,
Yeah.
so good.
But creatine is one of those. It gets talked about a lot. There's a lot of myths about it. One of the things I run across too with creatine is, they'll be like, "Oh, my pediatrician said I shouldn't."
Mm,
And I love doctors, immense respect for doctors. The thing though is when it comes to supplements and nutrition, most of them just aren't well versed. And the reason for that is because with any field of science, the science is always changing, the research is changing. Doctors are incredibly busy and medicine is incredibly complex. So the free time they do have, they are spending that by staying up to date on changes in medicine.
mm,
And that's what they should be doing. But unfortunately, that means they're not really up to date with nutrition and supplements because it's not worth their time. And so again, completely understand that and respect that. But we run into this issue where they are outdated on things with nutrition and supplementation. So a lot of them will still think that it's bad for your kidneys or, causes baldness or anything like that. So we run into those issues because then there's the authority of, well, my pediatrician, well-trained doctor said not to take creatine. And so you run into that issue because there's obviously going to be more trust for that, which again, I love when people trust their doctors because there's a lot of people that don't, and that actually really
Yeah.
bothers me. So I love that you trust your doctors. But that's why I'm always open to that discussion, be like, well, this is why. And I've had a lot of times what I'll say is when that comes up with a client, I'll say, this is actually what the current research says. And this is, maybe the doctor is thinking this or that, and this is what the research says now. I encourage you to maybe, next time talk to the doctor, just talk to them, say you're working with a dietitian now, and he said this with this research and all that, and they might be like, okay, yeah, go with them. Because a
Hmm.
lot of doctors now are understanding like dietitians have more of that expertise in nutrition and supplement. So
Oh yeah.
and that's why I love doctors because especially like the pediatricians, general practitioners and all that, and then obviously specialists as well. A lot of them have respect for dietitians, which is great. Um, because it makes that we're not fighting each other. I'm not saying don't do what your doctor said, don't do that. We're working together, which is great. They understand their limitations, and I obviously understand my limitations compared to what they know. So it makes for a lot better team effort.
Yeah, it does. Plus then like y'all can actually test for deficiencies and stuff too, which is
Yeah,
important when you're talking about supplementation. That's like supplementation that you can measure
yeah,
versus like random supplements like I don't know. There's lots of nootropics out there. Like that's a random
yeah,
supplement. You can't really measure that very effectively. Um, but yeah, dietitians and doctors, they are pretty great. I always recommend.
yep.
And the nice thing is that most of them are covered by insurance.
Yes, a lot of doctors are. I nutrition's a little bit different. It's a lot harder to get set up. I do know a handful of dietitians that do take insurance.
Yeah, you do have
I
to find the right one who
Yeah,
takes your
I've tried
insurance.
it,
It's hard.
and yeah, I've tried it, and I haven't been able to set it up. A couple reasons. One, because with sports nutrition, it's just sports nutrition in general is not going to be covered because it's not a
Mhm.
medical necessity. Um, so it's just and a lot of what I do wouldn't be covered by insurance anyway. Then there are some ones that do, and a lot of times these people have good insurance anyway, so they'll get out of network benefits. So I just fill out a
Mhm.
form, really simple. I put my information in, I put the code, so whether it's disordered eating, failure to thrive, whatever it is, submit it to insurance, reimbursed. It's great.
Yeah.
It's they have to go through that initial out of pocket cost, but then they get it back. Um, which is good, and it's usually with the better insurance companies will do that, which is good because they realize like, oh yeah, they're not in a network or whatever, but like they know that treating this eating disorder now is going to save them a lot of money going forward. Because
Hmm.
yeah, insurance companies don't want you to be in the hospital, I'll tell you that much. So anything they can do to avoid spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for you to be in a hospital, they'll likely, you know, consider it at least.
Yeah, which is good. And well, for the majority of the cases that we
Majority.
see.
There are a handful, as we know, but
Yeah.
it all
It
depends.
just never hurts to try.
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
So, kind of speaking about all of that, could you just tell us a little bit more about where to find you if someone wants to work with you on improving their athleticism or similar areas?
absolutely. Yeah. So, like I said, yeah, I'm a sports dietitian. I work a lot with high school, middle school, and college athletes. That's not all I do though. So, any adults listening as well, I do work with general fitness and nutrition as well. So, just if you're working your 9 to 5 or even crazier hours, dealing with kids, all that, and you're just working out for general health, or maybe you're doing like races, I work with that as well, as far as nutrition and the fitness aspect. Several ways to reach out to me, social media. So, nutrition.with.derek on Instagram, email Derek, Derek, at fcnutritionnj.com, or my website, fcnutritionnj.com. I have several programs. I have like a VIP coaching program. I have my regular nutrition coaching program, meal plans, workouts, a lot of different ways to work with me, depending on obviously how much you want to do and obviously how much you're able to spend. So I try to incorporate I have high ticket programs and low ticket so that everyone can be included. Because I don't think that financial status should impede you from being able to get at least some help with your nutrition and fitness. So yeah, so those all that information on my website, or again, you can DM me or email me to get more information and chat. But yeah, we're again athletes, adults, whatever you're looking to work on, nutrition, fitness, um, definitely here to help you guys.
Amazing. And I'll have all that linked in the show notes so that if
Perfect.
anyone wants to just go there, they can grab it.
Love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for chatting all
Of
about
course.
this. It was obviously very interesting and
No, it was fun to talk.
yeah.